So, I hope you all are full and have some more energy for some more presentations. So now we welcome Jan, and he will show you how to make better user experience in Qlik dashboards. So please welcome Jan.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sophie. Hi, everyone. Well, I thought it was going to be hard to follow lunch. Now I have to follow the excessive brain thrust of Stefan and Michael as well. That just made everything quite a bit worse. But anyways, I'll try and compensate. And I'm not like those guys. Major disclaimer: I don't have the capacity to memorize everything I'm going to say, so I'm going to need my notes. Otherwise, I won't be funny. And I think I need that going for me. So let's see. So I'll be fairly stationary here, but that's what it is. And that might lead us quite well. It'll lead us quite well. No? Well? Got it pointed at something? Oh, the large one. Ah, there you see. User experience for you. So that leads us quite well into the next part, which is who is this guy, and why am I listening to this? Yeah, well, I'm Jan. I'm a senior Qlik consultant at Qonnect in Denmark, and I'm also the team lead for all our Qlik consultants in Qonnect in Denmark. I've been working with Qlik Sense and more recently Qlik Cloud since 2015, building dashboards, doing data modeling front end. And I've done a lot of it, and done a lot of dashboards, and I've done a lot of mistakes building those dashboards. And I continue to do so. But that's all right. I mean, as long as I remember to learn from those mistakes, I think that's imperative, and take that learning and bring it with me. Well, I hope to somehow redeem myself by sharing those learnings with you. Maybe you've made the same mistakes. Maybe you're about to make the same mistakes, and maybe you're happy to do so. But hopefully, by listening to this, you'll be able to navigate all of this, knowing you're not alone. So, yeah, go us. So why should we bother? Why did we put a fluffy design topic on a developer summit? Well, from experience, myself included here, most developers in any shape or form or definition, let's say people who label themselves as developers, most of them tend to be quite frank about the visual part of their work not being their strong suit. And the rest, well, they tend to be lying. So actually putting some consideration into how you design a dashboard and your visuals, it tends to be an overlooked craft now, seeing that the data scientists and engineers seems to be the rock stars of data analytics now, but it might not be prioritized, it might not be something we as developers think we're good at, but it is essentially the roots of where BI came from, right? So it's communicating the data we're exploring, right? So it's uncovering a ton of important data can actually lead to nothing if we can't really communicate it properly. I learned the better way how not considering how I communicate all this awesome data that I've found within the deep dungeons of my clients' data realms, it simply kills adoption if I don't communicate it properly. And not having adoption, that kills the return on investment, the investment in time and money that we do when we build dashboards. And we want return on investments. that's a good thing. Some might even call it a key KPI. So yeah. So when we as developers build dashboards properly, we transform the work of our users from trying to get an overview of what's going on to actually starting from that point and starting considering why is it happening and what should I do about it instead. So this shifts the time and energy from our users to actually start making decisions and creating value. So we shift from the what questions to the why questions, right? Yeah. So in the interest of me not just sharing a bunch of random tips and tricks and code snippets here, I've decided to try and give it some context. And I'll share my underlying method for designing dashboards, something I've painfully crafted over the years of continuous failing. And in the interest of time, we're not going to give all of these concepts the love and deserve the love they rightfully deserve, but we'll single out some application of this into some Qlik dashboarding along the way, and hopefully will trigger some food for thought for you guys. So this presentation is going to be a mix of presentation and some demoing, how this could actually be applied into your dashboards, and how taking such approach can affect your dashboards and what it does. So again, I'm going to spend quite some time explaining my thinking and elaborating on why this is my preferred way of working. But being mindful that this is a developer summit, and some of you are developers, we saw that just a while ago. I'm going to try and translate it into some actual practical examples, some code snippets, and whatever you have. But the main takeaway here should give you some food for thought on how to approach dashboard designing. As developers, we can code, we can build stuff, we can extract data, but we do tend to need some guidance in how do we build visuals and how do we build UX and user experience. At least it helps me. So, without further ado, with a disappointing lack of drum roll, here they are. My key concepts, or commandments, if you will, for designing dashboards and reports. These are the 4 ones that I find are universally applicable for any type of dashboard or report, and this can be the from all the way from the operational to the strategic ones, and all the way from the basic stale financial reporting and all the way to the most self-service dynamic dashboard. And these tend to come back to me as being universally applicable. You may have noticed that there are 4. You may also have noticed that they start with CO in their name, all of them. That's not a coincidence. It makes it easier to remember. There are many more CO words that I could have used. There are many more non-CO words that could have made the list, all relevant. But during the years, this is one that I've sort of boiled it down to and seem to always come back to that helps me design dashboards in a better way. So I'm happy to take questions along the way, by the way, so feel free to raise your hand or shout at me, and I'll try to notice. Otherwise, we can take it at the end, but feel free to take it as we go as well. So let's look at the first one. Correct. So the definition by Britannica dictionary that I found online is that it needs to be true and accurate, it needs to be agreeing with facts, and it needs to be right. So I'm well aware that you all know this. This is not something that surprises you, I guess. What we present should be right. Otherwise, it does not compute. There's a syntax error and whatever else terms you use. And I know this could be slightly out of scope of what I'm actually presenting, but it's a pet peeve of mine, and this is my presentation, so I can do as I please. But why am I stressing on this? Well, I've seen way too many times that these investments in dashboard development be dropped completely or be delayed with substantial cost to follow because there's a lack of trust in what we are building. There's simply a lack of trust in the displayed data. I've made top-notch designs, if I may say so, ticking all the boxes, only to realize that during the process, I haven't considered what I'm actually showing the users. I haven't considered what I'm showing them is right. And I exposed them to false data and wrong data all along the way, leaving my adoption in the gutter right from the get-go. So when it comes to making an impact with what we're building, the golden shortcut here is to have trust. Have your users trust in what you're building. And a fairly overlooked point in this that I've found, and a mistake I've made far too often, is this can be valid even during development, when you're iterating over what you're building with your end users. Because when we build something new for users, they've not seen this before. They might be even new to BI. So the only thing they recognize are the numbers. That's the only thing they feel comfortable with. And if those are wrong, even despite all my thinkable disclaimers and saying this is just testing, if they don't recognize themselves in what they're seeing, they'll simply just lose trust in what they're seeing over time, over iterations of it. So just keeping that in mind throughout the process, it simply just helps you have that trust from the get-go. And it helps you to build adoption. So building a trustworthy dashboard is, of course, many moving parts, but essentially this is at the core of it. We must, as developers, ensure that what we're showing our users is right, both during development, but also after go live, of course. I know we don't live in an ideal world, but we, as developers, can go a long way to accommodate for this. And at least it won't hurt our chances of adoption. Prioritize it while developing. It helps. So first part to this is, of course, validation. Validation is essential right from the start of a project, right? So one thing I've found to be true throughout any project basically I've done is when you start a BI project or start a new dashboard, what happens is all the data quality skeletons come falling out of the closet. So you want to make sure right away that you validate the data and you make sure that you're working on the actual right data right from the get-go. And another aspect of this is understanding the data. I cannot stress how important this is when start to build analytics. Way too often I've deep dived into making visualizations right away. I got the data, it seems to be right. Let me start building stuff. But only to find that later on I've built something that was obsolete, that isn't right, or maybe even more frustrating, I'm painting myself into a corner going down a route that I can't go back on simply because I didn't take the time to understand the data up front that helped me guide the user, help the user on what they actually need. So I end up with something that's less than optimal because I didn't take the time right at the get-go. Now there's an old acquaintance of mine. Maybe you know him. I call him Abe. He has this saying, and I think he's quoted slightly wrong here. Maybe I think he's quite old now, so maybe he just put it wrong, but I've helped him. So when you build a dashboard, if I'm giving 6 hours to build a dashboard, I spend the first 4 understanding and validating my data. So, I mean, if Abe says it, then it might be right. No, but there's a point in the preparation to do this prior to start building. It just helps you all along the way. And doing the validation up front even helps with the validation you need to do continuously on all the expressions you're doing, on the data modeling you're doing, because you can always come back to that validated starting point that you had. So my learning here, I guess, is that, let's remove Abe, the lack of validation will simply just hurt your adoption. I've seen projects go bad multiple times due to the lack of validation. And I've been talking about this for quite a while now, and I haven't even gotten to the worst risk in this, is that what if nobody notices that you're wrong? What if nobody sees that what you're presenting is actually wrong? That's even worse, because then they start making decisions on something that's false. And that can lead to a hell of a lot of problems making wrong decisions, simply due to the fact that we haven't validated that what we're showing is right. So, and there's another thing to this. So if we want to translate this into some sort of Qlik context, apart from the obvious around the validation, the nature of Qlik, as much as we love the beauty of it, present us with an embedded challenge as well, because everything is connected, and everything can be interacted with by the user. And if there's one thing we know, and if users can click on something and pull a lever, you can be damn sure that they will at some point. So we, as developers, need to make sure that even if they click on something we didn't intend them to click on, everything still works and still stays in context. So let's stop my stream of talking here for a while. And maybe we can switch to the laptop. So I've been disconnected. Let's just reconnect again. So for this is my little demo dashboard. This is a sales setup. So consider that I'm in the process of building a dashboard for a sales manager who has no previous BI. He just knows his data. And for this, well, I've made it harder on myself, but I've built this. He wants some sort of daily snapshot of how is things going, and he wants to be able to track it back in time. So to do that, I've created an analysis state, just right at the top there, the drop down. And this is disconnected from the rest of my data. So I could have done this any way I want to, because what I want to achieve here is that when the user select one date, it doesn't filter the data set, because I don't want to show data from just that one date. I could have done that in multiple ways. It could have been in a variable I put it in, let the user control that one. It could have been an as-of table, could have been many things. For this, I've chosen just to go with a data island, just a row of dates. And my users can select that, because that way I have a data I can reference, my set expressions, that doesn't really filter the data at all. But of course, in my actual visualizations, I'm using the date that's connected to my data set. So I'm using the order date. And now, when I built this, I thought, well, it should be quite obvious that you set the date up top. But what eventually happens is he's going to click on this date. And now I got to make sure that everything works. And as you can see at the top left, it doesn't work. Something broke. And this is just an example, of course, but we can find this in multiple ways, just simply because of the nature of Qlik, that users will interact with anything. They will use it in ways we didn't think of. They'll filter and click and move things around. So we always need to accommodate for something like this. So, of course, if I want to do this here, let's just fix it right away. I want to just set my order date to be ignored here and here. And luckily, we're back on track. So it's just something to consider everywhere, that as we develop these things, we need to make sure that everything works, even when we let the users loose on it. Small little example of that. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation, please. I'm getting the hang of this. Yeah, so the first checkpoint to do is everything correct when I'm developing? Have I validated that everything I show is correct? Have I made sure that the dashboards continue to work even when users are using them in odd ways we didn't think of? It'll help. So moving on, next point, point of context. Now, luckily I saw during the quiz we had that this is the thing that all of you, or at least most of you, think is most important as well. When it comes to BI, the best decisions we can draw from this is through true data that is contextualized, right? And I see context here like in the way that this is how we frame the data the essence of the data we're conveying into the existing knowledge of that our users have. And our users are really different. I mean, some need very little context to know what's going on. Some need this to be fully declared and specified what they're seeing. And we all know that different chart types requires different levels of data literacy to be understood, and our beloved users might be able to do that. But if it's not contextualized, it'll still just be numbers. It'll still just be standalone numbers that nobody knows really what is going on with. Maybe they don't know exactly what it means. Maybe they don't know how that relates to the outside world. So context becomes very, very specific for something we need to have all the way through what we are building and showing. A number on its own, it's just a number. It doesn't drive insight in any way. So if we're not communicating these things clearly, we will leave users in the dark. So finding insights from data might seem just fairly simple on the basic of it, but it can actually turn out to be quite time-consuming if we're not helping our users in the right way. If we force our users to struggle on finding out what's going on instead of just giving them that from the get-go and letting them work on the why. I'm not going to let this go just yet. Context is king. And I see two types of context. I've been touching a little bit upon this. So I see context in the way that we need to enable the users to correctly deduct what they're seeing. And that means we all know that for most of us, revenue can mean a ton of different things. It can be net revenue, it can be gross revenue. So if we don't specify that to the users, they will be left in the dark. They won't know what's going on, or they'll make wrong assumptions. So one part of context is just specifying what is actually we're seeing. Think in labels and legends and stuff. The other part of it is data context, which is where we relate the data to other data points, where we relate the data to the context of it, show how this fits into the world, what is the meaning of this data. So you have a revenue of X, but what does that mean? Is that good? Is it bad? Who knows? So providing some context to the data in that way is what I call data context, and that moves you from this superficial presentation of data and into actual genuinely understanding and what's going on. And I tend to find that this topic of context is what can generally take the bulk of my time with developing, because it is indeed a trade-off and an act of multiple compromises, right? Because we need to manage our real estate, and we need to manage the scalability of Qlik, and that's really, really hard when we want to show users the full context of what they're seeing. Take text for an example. Text is imperative in labeling and value labels and naming your axes and giving meaning to color keys, even inserting paragraphs with explanations on what people are seeing. Text is imperative, but it sort of opposes the visual nature of a dashboard, and it often compromises your dashboard real estate. But without the text, we can't really write the context we need. And I hate to break it, but I don't have the silver bullet for this. But I've simply learned that just being mindful of the challenge of it and the importance throughout the development process can be a make it or break it approach, really. So let's try and go into a demo now. Can we go back? We can. Excellent. So I'm just going to go somewhere else here. So I can almost already hear you vultures saying, well, Jan, you built this purposely to be bad, and you'll be annoying, but you'll be right. I even named the sheet bad, so you see. So yes, I did build this to be bad. But it does contain quite a lot of the errors that I've made, and I continue to see everywhere in the context of context. So this has a severe lack of context, right? So basically, I'm showing what the end user asked me to. He wanted to see his daily revenue, his profit, his margin, and he has a concept of bucket size that he wants to do, and I've shown that here. So done deal, right? And he can switch between currencies. But the problem here, of course, being there's no insight into what the revenue is. What's the definition of this revenue? Is it net revenue? Is it gross revenue? What's the currency? I guess you could find it up in the top right corner, but we're not really helping our user in any way to give the context onto what it is. And the margin, how is that calculated? There could be different definitions to what margin is, right? And the same with bucket size. So we're not really giving any hints as to what this is. And there's a glaring big fire going on here in the lower end. We haven't even labeled we haven't even put a legend to our line chart here. So I guess we can see an overall trend, but it doesn't really make any sense, right? So we need to put the legends on there. So if I go back to my Miss Goody Two Shoes example here, I provided the context. So you have the currency for everything. You have the definition of what this is, how it's been calculated, at least on a need-to-know basis. And more importantly, I've added the legends as well. But more importantly, what's also been done here is I've added data context. So now the revenue and the profit is not just some random number where you need to be fairly deep into your daily operations to know if that's good or bad. Now it's contextualized. So I'm showing this versus the average of the past 6 days. This could have been anything else. Could have been previous day. Could have been a week ago. Whatever might be a key KPI for our users. But it simply just provides you with a fairly easy way to see where something is happening. What is going on? Well, my profit seems to be going down. My revenue seems to be going down. But I have some context also to see, well, could this be due to an abnormality or an outlier? So I have the visual view of the data as well, so I can see, well, maybe if one of these days had an extraordinary revenue, well, then I would know that could be the reason why I was below average. But it doesn't seem that way from this. It seems I'm just dropping. So that's what context can do for you. And I want to touch on a little bit on something else. Something we also see quite a while. So we have a navigation pane here, but it doesn't really show you where you are. So yeah, you can navigate, but it would be nice to just have highlighted where I am actually. So we can do that, I think Marcus and Sebastian touched upon this as one of the get sys attribute function. This is a related one I'm using here, which makes it quite easy to reuse these across the dashboard. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the in-object function here. And the in-object function will deduct where this object resides. In this case, the sheet. So I put in the sheet ID into my if statement. I'm referencing the sheet ID from up here, saying if this object is in the sheet, in this sheet, you should turn this background white and the text black. So it's a way of building something that I can reuse across sheets, and it'll automatically work wherever I go. Another piece of context that I've added here, just want to go out of edit mode, is I've added some information down here for the user. So again, providing some context onto what this is. I've even tried to tell them to please use the analysis data at the top. Don't try and click something else. But at least I've tried. It's not going to happen, but at least I've tried. But it can help bring about giving the user the purpose of what this is, and you can sort of get ahead of things if they say, well, I needed something else. Well, it might state here that that's not the purpose. It's somewhere else. And another little piece of good practice, I put in the latest data refresh up here. Something that's highly valuable to many users, knowing when the last data refresh was. Also a way of dodging questions, right? And it could be the latest data refresh. It could also be the latest timestamp of the latest record you have, depending on the case. So it could be both. Both could be relevant, right? But again, it's just adding a little bit of context to what the user is seeing. Right. Let's go back to the presentation, if I may. Yeah, so so the next checkpoint, the second checkpoint here being, have I made sure that my message is clear and unmistakable? Have I given my numbers context? Are they related and benchmarked against industry or targets, against previous periods? And am I being precise about what users are actually seeing? Can they make false assumptions because I haven't declared the data the right way? Questions so far?
How do you make sure you don't put too much context? It becomes almost like storytelling.
Well, yeah. So how do I make sure that I'm not putting too much context? Well, I think you mentioned so it doesn't become storytelling. Well, I don't see storytelling necessarily as a bad thing, but I think there's natural limitations. I mean, the way Qlik scales what you're presenting naturally puts limits on how much context you can provide. Of course, given the point we're going to be at now, there's also a point of not overcomplicating things and not putting too much information in there because it dilutes the user's attention. So of course it's a trade-off, but I think, at least in my experience, I find myself struggling to put in the context more than I find it hard to limit the context per se. But of course you can be wary of it. You don't want the user spending all the time reading a document or manual for just deducting what a KPI is, right? So of course there's some trade-off to it, but I don't find it to be an issue too much because there's natural limitations. in the real estate. Anyone else? All right, I'm doing an awesome job. Cool. So next point, concise. Serving you another rookie Jan mistake here. And I continuously feel the urge, and I'm sure you do too, to jam-pack your dashboards full of information that you found. You found a ton of cool information in all the data, and you want to put that into your dashboard. And if you don't have that urge, your users have, and will hit you over the head with it, because navigating something is evil for some reason, or clicking around is evil. They want everything displayed at one place. But the effectiveness of a dashboard largely relates to how precisely and concisely you can present the information. So it's defined here as using a few words and not including extra or unnecessary information. And the conciseness of a BI dashboard is not about limiting data in that sense. It's simply just about distilling it like fine whiskey into the most valuable parts of it, and just getting right to the point, enabling users to get right to the point and not distracting them with stuff that they are not really prioritizing. Because that would just make for faster decision making and more informed decision making, better decisions. And doing it that way also serves as a catalyst for asking questions and going into deeper analysis. So by highlighting the most relevant information, it directs the attention to the areas that actually needs further investigation in a different way than if we're cluttering our dashboards. So the first point in being concise is making sure that what you're doing is right for the purpose. And how do we get about this? Well, first off, and I know this is a tedious thing, it's like being told to eat your salads or exercising, but talking to your users, scary and evil as they may be, there's no denying it. It's simply just necessary. Had talking to end users started with a CEO, I might have put it in there as well, but now I think it fits quite well here. But of course, what isn't obvious is just how do I talk to my users. But there's a few things that you can always go by. So ask them what the purpose is of the dashboard. What actions should it support? What questions should it answer? That's a key one. What do they plan on consulting this for? What information do they need the most? Gives us some insight to what to highlight, what to prioritize. And it could also be, how do you go about getting this information today? Because that gives an impression on their expectations and how they perceive the outcome of what you're building. Because that helps give you the let's say, context of what you need to build. It gives you a purpose for what you're building, and it allows you to be precise in what you're building and concise in what you're building, and enables us to ask just the right questions. Again, distilling the content of your dashboard, right? So we want to be answering the right questions, not all questions. So the other point here is, or related point is limitations. So we should, managing real estate in a dashboard, especially in Qlik, we know that it's essential. So some of my most successful recent projects, and yes, I've had successful projects, I've made it a document to just swap data points that are less important for more focus area and context for what is actually important, making space for white space and highlighting things that are important. And even though this is often a bit of a brawl with end users initially, it can be quite rewarding later on. both as a developer and as an end user and decision maker. And this is not something that it's not just something I'm saying. There's actually some science to it. If you're familiar with Miller's law, it's studies by a guy named George A. Miller. We know that there's a limit to how much the human mind can contain simultaneously and can process simultaneously. And his studies found that it's about 7 things we can hold in our working memory at one time. So translating that to dashboards means that as soon as you're adding your 7th or 8th object, you should be cautious, because you're starting to go beyond the point of what your users can actually comprehend at one point. You're actually now adding noise, so make sure that it's worth it. Even though those extra objects might be relevant, the general rule of thumb here is don't go much beyond 6, 7, or 8 objects on a dashboard. So, yeah, we don't want to clutter our dashboards. And well, I'm going to go back to my dear old friend Abe here. Another quote that he somehow got wrong. But yeah, avoid cluttering if you would have peace. It just helps you along the way. It clears up misunderstandings. It clears up the purpose of your dashboard, and it gives you less questions from your annoying end users. We need to let the user digest the information load that we're presenting them with. Otherwise, we will lose or dilute their attention from what's important. We oftentimes find ourselves running out of space and real estate for what we're building, and it strains the project. It strains the time and the project, and both in time and value. When a dashboard is cluttered with too much information, it just becomes difficult for users to gain value from it. And I even find that, and I think this is true, that a concise dashboard is even more user-friendly. I mean, it's easier to interact with if you limit the number of objects that you're showing. And it's not that you're completely removing those data points, just move them somewhere else. You ask your users to navigate to somewhere else to get those insights. And what that also does is it's sort of a win-win here, because as soon as you convince your users to that being a good idea, it also means that when you move users to somewhere else, you can tailor the second dashboard or your analysis dashboard to be more specific to the actual topic you're trying to be. You can be more tailored in you can be more specific in the analysis that you're presenting to the users when you do this. So win-win. But let's try and go back to our dashboards and see what happens when we try to declutter a little bit. So let's go somewhere else. Not concise, so I guess you know what's coming. So this is a dashboard that basically contains much of the same information that the first one does. I've added a few more KPIs. I've added a few more objects, but it's nothing excessive. I think most of you will have seen dashboards like this. But there's a lot of problems with it. We're way beyond what a user can naturally comprehend at one point. And I think it's quite obvious that this is much harder to deduct anything from than the first one we saw. So one is that we've added a lot of KPIs, and even though they might be really relevant, there's units in here, there's average profit per order, number of customers, number of orders, number of unique products sold, all good stuff, but it's not actually what my user is prioritizing. So I shouldn't put it in here. I should put it somewhere else for a daily snapshot overview of what the user is doing to conduct his business here. And there's another thing here. Down here, I'm not limiting my data set. So cluttering can be in the entire dashboard. It can also be within the objects. So right now, I have way too many data points here for anyone to deduct anything meaningful from this. So I should limit the amount of data that I'm presenting in the dashboard. We all know and love set expressions, right? So that's fairly easy to do. Should be able to just add some set expressions here. So now I'm only showing way fewer data points, and it just makes it easier to digest. It makes it easier for the user to understand. You can distinguish all the individual data points now. And if the user needs further history, present it in some other way, somewhere else, or give the user the option to switch if need be. You can make these things dynamic, of course. And the same goes for lists like this one. It's hard to comprehend what this really is. So again, you can simply just go in and say, well, I need a limitation here. It's easy. I mean, it isn't even a big effort, right? Now it's much easier to digest. And well, there's another thing here. Everything is crammed together. And there's lines here put in, and I know I've done this, and I know I've done this intentionally, but I see this somewhere. And it's actually doing it's not really doing a good job of making natural splits. So there's no real connection with the KPIs I'm seeing in the top right, even maybe just the size of the object really, but it's not really a logical split of what I'm seeing. And there's a point about white space as well. That I'm not leaving any white space here, and white space can really do a lot. So white space, for those who don't know, it's the stuff in between the visualization, but it can do a lot in the terms of making things easier to comprehend. It makes it more concise. You can even use white space to group objects, to naturally group objects that are related. So another point there. Yeah, and again, coming back to your question, Dan, even this, when I clutter it like this, it makes it really, really hard to give the context that I need. You can even see I even have some issues here, right? I can't really show it. I have to go back and fix that at some point if I want to. Yeah, enough about that. Let's go back to the presentation. So the third question here is, the third checkpoint I might want to do is, am I answering the right questions here? Am I answering just the right questions? Or am I cluttering my dashboard with, let's not call it unnecessary information, but just not the key information? So, on to the fourth point, comprehensible. And of course this relates to the other points I've made. The definition here from my online dictionary being able to be understood. So this is the fourth and final pillar of my hard-fought wisdom here. So we need to make sure that what we're building makes sense, that it can be understood by our end users, our target audience. So we can build everything to be as pretty as we possibly can, but if we don't consider the end users and how they are going to deduct meaning from it, they'll simply just move on. And there's a guy called Frank Chimero, who's a sort of product design guru, who said people ignore design that ignores people, right? So if you're not having your end users in mind when designing, people are going to ignore you. So a few of the tools in this toolbox. The DART principle, for those of you who've been working with Qlik for some time, you've probably encountered this before. Those of you who haven't have probably done so anyways, just without knowing, because it is a fairly straightforward and quite obvious way of going about it. But it's a specific framework used to guide the creation of an effective user journey in a dashboard. So first of all, we start out, the general idea is we start out with a dashboard, which is just a quick at-glance view of what's going on, basically what I was showing initially. It should have a number of critical KPIs that should somehow trigger the why questions, right? So we want to make sure that this triggers the users and guides them to where they need to be. That's the point in it. That's the starting point for an analysis. Then we guide the users into analytics. That means we can take them away from the dashboard part or the main overview or whatever we want to call it, and into the little bit more specific analytics, so we can tailor our analytics to different purposes. Usually this is not a 3-sheet app. There's of course more sheets to each of these. Could be at least, especially in the middle part. But then this is where we guide the users into the more specific, tailored visualizations towards what they're trying to achieve and what they've been prompted to ask questions about from the dashboard, right? And then the last final thing, call it reporting, call it a table view, whatever you want to do, but this is where you basically drill down to the full list of line items that you have, basically displaying all the information. So you've figured out there's an outlier somewhere, you see a trend somewhere, you want to go in and look at the actual transactional data to just find out what's going on. That's what you do in the final step. So this is sort of the user journey. You start with the full overview, go into the specifics, and find out what's going on, and then you can drill down to the actual line items. So that's the DAR principle for you. Another thing that we need to consider here is layout and the way we ask users to navigate. So the layout is another thing that there's actually some science to. It's not just me. The Nielsen Norman group has done a lot of research in this regard, figuring out that the way users interact with a dashboard or read a dashboard or web pages in general is through this F shape. So they start in the top left corner and start moving horizontally to the right. And then they move down to the next and do the same, and they continue that pattern. They done this through eye tracking and different other stuff. So this is how we interact with web pages usually, at least in the Western world. There's similar studies by something called the Gutenberg diagram that does the same thing. It's a Z shape, a C shape, but it's basically the same, just not repeated as many times as the F shape. So there's a lot of science to how we actually go about these, go about digesting a dashboard. So we can bring that into the design as developers. So we can, if we adhere to this, we put all the most important stuff in the top left corner, because that's where we want our key points to be, because that's where the users start focusing first. And then we can build out that to the right horizontally, move down to the next line, and so on and so forth. And even though it can be tempting to shake things up a little bit sometimes and move stuff around just to get a new look and feel, I would encourage that we defy that temptation and build it the right way instead. So there's some science behind this. Another thing that, another mistake that I used to make when I was younger and crisper was that I insisted on my users learning to navigate my apps the Qlik way, right? Because there's navigation in the Qlik app natively. Why should I build anything? It's right there. Well, truth be told, it was also quite a lot harder to build custom navigation previously than it is now. But as I've seen my adoption hurt from this approach, I also come to realize that when I insist on decluttering and moving information to other sheets, well, maybe I should also be the one helping the users to actually navigate to those sheets, right? Makes a little bit of sense. So that's one thing, just getting adoption, but also just making sure that they actually get the full insights from what I've built. So customizing your navigation can go a long way in getting the full value of your work. And I think I'm a little bit stressed for time now, right? But, we should have extra time, right? A little bit, yeah. Okay, so let's look at how that could look. Let's go back to the demo. So what I've done here, no, not here. This is the bad one. Hopefully you all noticed that right away. So what I've done here, of course, is being the good little schoolboy I am, I've talked to my user and found out what is the actual, my sales manager here, what is it that actually what is he measured on? What is his pain point? What is the most important thing to him? And that's the profitability, that's his profit. So naturally, you guessed it, we put that at the top left corner. And then I built it out recessively to the right, coming down. He has some targets. Someone told him to have targets, but he needs to follow up on those as well, and even split a little bit by target, by product category here. But so that's the layout I've built, adhering to what we know from the science behind it, the F shape or the Z shape of navigating a dashboard. And building it out this way, it goes along with the natural way that users consume the dashboard. So it's a fairly good idea. And coming back to the DAR principle, well, I guess here we see revenue being down. And maybe I want to explore that a little bit. So I help my user guide him to a more specific analysis of how is my revenue broken down. Now, this dashboard leaves a lot to be desired, but anyways, it's just for the purpose of showing you the DAR principle. So this is where we dive into something specific. So a revenue analysis. There should be many more sheets on the left here, and we could have many more sheets. So we could have a product analysis, a customer analysis, we have a profit analysis, whatever take we want to take on this, the geographical analysis, POS analysis, whatever it might be, right? But this is just an example of showing. So we go from having the full overview, we see that there's something going on right away. We don't have to spend time figuring out what's going on. We can see that right away. We can go into the dashboard and see, well, what might be the reason for that. Start trying to draw insights from this directly and move on. Or maybe we just want to see who my top sales rep is, and give her some kudos. Maybe that's just the point. But it sort of helps you along the way, and if you want to go further, then okay, and then now I can go to my order details using the DAR principle, and I get a list of all the orders that this Elizabeth Smith have done. So that's the natural flow. That's how you go from the high-level insights on where is something happening to actually getting the full view of the data. Now, the demo pane here, there's different ways of building something like that. I've used just ordinary buttons to do it, but there's this new thing called the layout container, right? Which is quite useful for doing stuff like this. Makes it reusable. It does present another challenge that changing information like this in it can be a little bit tricky. But anyways, it's a nice way of making a navigation pane reusable. The way I've done it here, where I've just built it using buttons like this, it really helps just doing it at the end, so I only have to do it with a minimal effort. And maybe I can just, so I've strived to let this be, for the purpose of this, to let this be basic Qlik out-of-the-box functionality, and it is. There's no extensions used here or anything. It's out-of-the-box Qlik functionality, all of this. But I'm using a well, it's not a secret anymore. I guess it's a bit of a hack we all know, that with the multi KPI we can add some CSS into this. So that's how I've managed to get my background dark here with my navigation pane. Let me just show you here and see. I have my multi KPI in my corner here, hidden away, and maybe we can actually see what's going on. Is it okay? Yeah, perhaps, sort of. So let me just, I know this is a developer summit, I need to show something, so it's going to be this. So what I've done here is I set the background using the panel sheet, and the way I've done this is something I found is quite useful. I reuse it all the time. I'm setting a background image, or multiple background images. For here, I'm using the linear gradient, but I'm using the same colors twice, just because I don't want the gradient, but I want the option. So I'm setting 2 background images. I'm defining how wide they should be. So one of them should be 10%, so the black one here, 10%, and the other one should be the other 90% of the width, and it should be 100% height, both of them. So I could have added another one if I wanted my top headliner there to be another background color as well. I could just add a third one, and I define from which starting point they should have. So that's a little bit of a way of setting a background. Now there's another little thing here, and this looks daunting perhaps, but what I'm actually doing here, and I'm happy to share this with anyone, is I'm actually giving, I'm taking my multiple KPI that has no real use and hiding it in an analysis mode, but leaving it visible in edit mode. Because if I'm hiding it in edit mode, I'm screwed. So that's a good thing. Makes it easy to hide it and still use it. And I'm doing some small other things here. I tend to find that the date picker I'm using from the custom extensions don't really allow me customization. So I've changed the background color to be transparent and done a little bit with the fonts and stuff. So hopefully someday Qlik will allow us to do that right away. Maybe. You never know. Yeah, so that was some code for you as well, not just talking, right? Great. So if we go back to the presentation, please. That was the demo. I want to talk a little bit about colors, and this is a bit of a party pooper, I'm sorry, but we shouldn't just spray our colors like this, basically, like a happy unicorn threw up on this slide somehow. But colors should always serve a purpose, because otherwise they become noise. I can't count the number of times I've had users ask me, well, couldn't we make this look prettier? Couldn't we make this more interesting or visually pleasing? Or they might even have said something as stupid as sexy. But I have to stress this, that's by no means the purpose of a dashboard. People, hopefully, have other means to satisfy those needs, right? Hopefully they go somewhere else for their aesthetic needs than into their dashboards. So the dashboards are built with a different purpose in life. And as much as design is important, it's not important that they're pretty. It's important that they work. So what we can be mindful of, we need to have a purposeful use of colors, right? So it's just when you use colors, and you may have noticed that in my dashboard, I'm not really I'm kind of a gray guy, not using a lot of colors, but that's for a purpose. I want to only use colors to draw attention to the areas that actually matter. So I want to make the colors have meaning, otherwise they're just clutter. And I want to limit the color palette. So I don't want to have 200 different colors in my dashboard, because it doesn't help the user in any way. Again, it's just cluttering, and it can be overwhelming for the users. So I try to have at least just maybe even 3 or 4 or 5 main colors that I use. and limit it to that. Another point here is being consistent with your colors. So if you're showing a specific dimension value as a specific color throughout in your dashboard, continue to do so if you can. So make sure that it stays the same way in all your visualizations. Otherwise it can really confuse your users. And of course you can use contrasting colors for clarity when you need so. So differentiating between dimension values, you need distinct colors. You need to be able to distinct those from each other. You saw the line chart before. If those colors had been too similar, you wouldn't be able to distinct them from each other, right? Using the color for emphasis sparingly. Sure, you can use bright and bold colors to draw attention to the most important information, or critical alerts, warnings, but use it sparingly, right? Because if everything is important, nothing is important. And this goes for shadows as well in your dashboard. I know we've been granted with the option to put shadows in basically anything, and Lucas does that all the time. I'm sorry, Lucas, I'm not pointing you out in any way. But yeah, we should use shadows in the same way. It's great for highlighting a specific thing, but it shouldn't be plastered all over the dashboard. It doesn't serve a purpose in that way. The background colors, keep them dim. Keep them easy on the eye. So white, gray, if you're doing dark mode, use black, or close to black, because loud or overly bright background colors would just distract and make it really hard to read the data. So keep your background colors dim. And an often overlooked point, even though we basically all know this, colors can have pre-wired meanings. So I think we all agree that if we see something being green, we naturally perceive it as good. So be wary of that. And if you see something being red, especially if it's next to something being green, we would perceive that to being bad. But it's also in context, so we could also have something like a heat map. And in a heat map, we would probably consider red to be just something where there's a lot of traffic. And then the opposite end of that would be blue. So it also relates to context, but it's really, really useful to just keep that in mind, that if we're using colors that might have a pre-wired meaning to people, we might actually distract them. Another example of that is using gray. Gray is often considered a null or other value, right? So using gray in your dashboard can also be a little bit tricky. So, and we know there's plenty of different ways to manage your colors in Qlik, right? How am I for time? I know I'm quite a bit over now. 5 minutes more, okay. Good. So the next point in making this comprehensible is choosing the right object for the right purpose. So this is another topic that might need a full day's workshop if I had the time. But it's something that everyone struggles with, especially if you're not building dashboards on a day-to-day basis, or you're just starting out. Because there's a lot to remember. There's a lot of different visualization types and object types, and they all have their specific purpose. But for this point, I actually do have some sort of, I do have a silver bullet, or at least some sort of bullet, because I tend to find that 9 out of 10 times, a simple bar chart, line chart, or KPI is sufficient to show and get your point across. Those are not validated numbers, but I think from most use cases, you will be just fine with a line or a bar chart, or maybe a combo chart if you're feeling sassy. But it will be appropriate for displaying a message. And we shouldn't be afraid to use them continuously and repeatedly. They are popular for a reason, and if you want to distinct them or distinguish between a lot of line charts, use something else. Use white space. Use shaded of coloring to achieve that. Do not choose different object types just to bring variation into your dashboard. It doesn't help anyone. And I cannot stress this enough. As tempting as it might be, and I've done this over and over, looked at my dashboard and said, well, this is just 6 line charts. Can I do something else? No, because the line chart is the right way to visualize this data. It's a time series. So what happens if I do that is I spend an overhead of dev time forcing a not suited visualization object into a purpose that it doesn't fit. And I leave the user with a suboptimal dashboard. Nobody wins. And yes, of course, there are cases for all these different object types, but they're not all that common. And when you have them, then spend the time there, of course. But spend it for that purpose and not for building something cool. You shouldn't overcomplicate your visualizations just because they're cool. I mean, I love the scatter plot as much as anyone, as nerdy as that might be. But use it to show relations between measures. Don't use it for anything else. That's what it's good at. And I think this is another hard pill to swallow, right? Kill your darlings. I know I've had this a number of times where I've spent a ton of time building something really, really cool, very complex, and I finally get it right. This shows what I'm supposed to show. But in reality, it's not really what the user needed. It looks cool, it works, I spend a lot of time on it, but that doesn't really mean that it's the right thing. So don't be afraid to kill your darlings, even if you spend half your life building them. So hence this, I could have started a lecture on going through all the object types in Qlik and their use cases, or the other way around. I could have gone through all the use cases and related the objects that's needed for it. But to be frank, you wouldn't remember this in a week when you have the problem again. So what I would encourage is that you go on your own, find a reference guide somewhere. There's an abundance of good documentation on what object suits what purpose out there. Find that and use it as a reference guide, as a lookup that you can use whenever you have the issue. There's no point, given what I've said before, that you learn by heart what all these different object types can do. Use a reference for it. And there's plenty of good ones out there. I can recommend one that I've seen, this one that Qlik actually built together with, I don't know if it was together with, based off something that the Financial Times did. They built an app. My little guru, Patrick Nordstrom, I think, built this together with the Financial Times, maybe. I'm going off memory here. But what that does is it shows you a lot of different examples of how to visualize data, given the need for it. And the cool thing about it is it functions very well as a way of looking up how to do it, but it also actually gives you examples of how to do it, so you can see right away you have an example in the app, and it's an app you can import into your tenant or your environment and keep it at hand. So that makes quite a bit of sense, right? So now I think I did have a little bit of a demo on this, but I think the point is probably quite clear, so in the interest of time, we'll just skip that one and go straight to this. So the final checkpoint that we have here is, am I actually helping the user here? Am I doing everything in my powers to make sure that they understand what they're seeing? Have I structured it meaningfully? Have I been conscious about my coloring? Have I adhered to the layouts that I know work? Am I using the right tool for the job? Not hitting screws with a hammer. It doesn't make any sense. So with that, I'll stop my seemingly endless talking here. We're getting there. So as you may have noticed, I've talked quite a lot about adoption here. Quite a few times mentioned that. And it's because it's imperative to gain value from your efforts, to get adoption. And while design is not the only factor in this, dashboard design definitely plays its part in it. And there's really no one size fits all. I mean, we are often struck by practicalities and disturbed end users, but we as developers can do a lot to optimize wherever possible and help guide the users to better results. And this approach that I've built here is something that definitely helps me in doing so. So who better to sum this all up than my good friend Abe? So I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts. So that's basically to the point. Oh, there he is, the old bugger, sneaking in on us as you speak of the devil. Yeah, so that's basically boiled it down to what I was trying to present here. We need to deliver the right facts in the right way.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
It was really interesting. Now I know how to build dashboards, that's for sure.
There you go.
So we will just take 5 minutes to get a coffee and come in here again, and then Jonathan will be back on stage talking about generative AI in Qlik. So 5 minutes. So, are you ready? Please take your seats again, so we can have the last presentation of the day. Good. Thank you. So now we'll welcome back Jonathan, who will speak about generative AI in Qlik.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Hello, guys. I hope you're all caffeinated. It's late afternoon, always the trickiest session. So we tried to put what we think was going to be the most fun title, at least. Let's see if the presentation is fun as well. But I think this is the number one thing I get the most questions about. What's Qlik doing within generative AI right now? And I'm in a really lucky position. I get to talk to a bunch of different customers from all types of industries. So retail, pharma, public relations, whatever it might be. And I get asked about this several times a week these days. So what can we do with Qlik within generative AI? And I think most of the time it's just their boss is telling them they need to do something. We heard about this thing, do something with it. What can we do right now? So hopefully this gives you some inspiration into what can we actually do in Qlik and with generative AI right now, and also what's coming up next. So I showed something like this slide in the beginning, and I want to go back to it really quickly. So my colleagues have already told you a lot about what Qlik does within moving data, transforming data, data quality, right? So let's say we now have all this beautiful quality data in our storage, and we need to interact with it somehow. We're still talking about billions of data points that we need to somehow make into some type of business action. And traditionally, as Jan has spoken a lot about, we're using dashboards, right? And the trick here is to, well, how do we compile all of this data into something that a human can understand and take an action on? But still, we're looking at mostly the history. So with AI, we of course want to talk more about what's coming up next, or actually just making the AI do it for us, or being a new way for us to interact with AI. And I think especially the interact point is where a lot of people will be at right now when it comes to AI. So it's not gonna, I don't think anyone is surprised by this, but it's not gonna replace a lot of the actions that businesses are doing right now. It's not gonna be completely just an AI cutting down entire divisions just based on what it sees in the data. There's still gonna be people involved. So this is more about, well, how is AI also changing the way we interact with this data as humans? And that really takes us to the AI paradox, which is as shown that if you look at like the first generation of business intelligence, a lot of time was spent centralized IT teams building reports, and then a lot less time was actually used on understanding these reports, and usually it would just be like a PDF file or something like that, and then making some decisions on that. Second generation of business intelligence, which is the self-service era, we're still spending a lot of time on building reports. Now we're just making them more interactive, so we might also spend a little bit more time interacting with them, but the time that's actually been spent on decisions and actions is still quite small compared to the total amount of time that's been spent on generating the insights. And now for the third generation, I think this is where we're going to be with AI for the next few years, and I think quite a while, is that we're using AI to give us the insights faster. We're getting it in clever ways. I'm going to talk a lot about that value. But we start to spend more and more time on actually the decision and action point. So we're actually getting rid of mostly the tedious, boring tasks. And that takes us to, well, what is actually the value we're generating? I think this insights, access, and efficiency is a pretty good overall way to view it when we look at it from a business analytics perspective. So of course, insights, how can we get better and more advanced insights into our data? How can we go from just looking at what happened to actually getting some more concrete predictions about what's going to happen next. So being able to take, really simple examples, just have a line chart, but also have the forecast in the line chart, right? Or as we showed earlier, not just having which customers is churned, but actually having a predictive way of telling us which customers do we think is going to churn next. So getting more insights out of our data is one way the AI is going to help us a lot. Access. So I don't know how many here have met users that have been giving a really beautiful dashboard, but they don't know how to read a scatter plot or a bar chart or whatever visualization is actually the best visualization for showing this specific type of data. There's this huge knowledge gap between what we can create in terms of data visualizations and what are actually the proper way to show things, and how educated the users are in actually understanding those visualizations. People are more used to text. They might need some description telling them, well, what you're looking at here, you should be focusing on this part, and actually what's interesting about this part is these things, and you should consider these actions. AI can help us get more out of these insights, more out of these dashboards. So it becomes a point of easier access to our data. And the final point, of course, efficiency. I think we have a lot of people here working with developing, of course, the Developer Summit. And this is really cool for you because, of course, a lot of the tedious tasks that we're doing when we're developing ETL flows, when we're developing dashboards, we spend a lot of time on stuff that could easily be automated by an AI. And considering how many said that they're using ChatGPT or similar tools daily, I would guess that a lot of you are already doing that. So who's going to benefit? Well, if you look at a few different profiles just quickly. So we have the business user that I just talked about. They don't know how to navigate a dashboard maybe. They have difficulties interpreting what they're seeing. So what we're giving them is a better way to understanding this data, right? For a business analyst, it might be that they're spending a lot of time wrangling with the data, making the perfect visualization. Oftentimes, there will be this one ad hoc report that they need to create, so they spend way too many hours to create a visualization of the data so they can actually use this report maybe once or twice. But again, using AI, we can speed up that process. And of course, data scientist, which is really good at creating predictive models, but how can we speed it up? There is increasing requirement, of course, for data science and data science models to try and predict the future and tell us more about our data. So how can we speed up that process, and how can we make it better integrated into our business analysis? So a little bit about how everyone can benefit. So what's Qlik bringing to the dance? Well, I'm going to start out with 3 pillars, and then another point that I think is actually the most important one. So first off, intelligent AI-powered insights. We already talked about this, but you're already asking a lot of business questions within Qlik. Now, does it make sense to then move out of Qlik if you're already using that for whatever insight and into a different system to ask the same type of questions, but without the visualization layer or the structure around that? Probably not. So giving people access to the power of this within the framework they're already using. Trust the connected platform makes sense. I mean, we already have a lot of security and governance in our Qlik platform. It can connect to basically any type of system you want. Again, that makes it just that much easier to get started with and makes it able to trust the AI. And Qlik is coming into the AI discussion with this concept of AI for everyone. So they're not just going to deliver something specifically made for data scientists or for business analysts. They're trying to cover all of the bases. And I'm going to show you a bit about how they're doing that. Now, a fun little image, and not broken, I promise. So this is, I think, a way we can view what we're doing today. So we have a huge amount of data. That will be the full picture. But of course, when we are making dashboards, we need to be selective. Like Ian just spoke a lot about, we can't show everything, and if we're honest, not everything is ready to be shown. So we have these islands that we're showing. These islands are basically our dashboards. It's our viewpoints into the data. And we have, of course, chosen these because we think they make sense, and we have cleaned them up and they're ready to be used, right? If, as I've been asked by some business leaders, we just say, can we just put an AI over all of our data? Like we have it all in our data lake or in the warehouse. Can we just plug that into ChatGPT? The picture gets a bit different. I mean, we really quickly start to see that, well, yeah, the islands that we were showing that made the whole picture look like it was all going to be really pretty, that was selective, right? We have a huge bias if we're just looking at that and thinking that represents our entire estate of data. When we start looking at it, the first issue most companies encounter is, well, we need to have much higher levels of data quality. And no, this is not going to be another presentation of data quality, but I think this is a really, really important point, that data quality does become important because of this fact, and companies should be looking into, if I'm going to be working on large scale with AI within the next 5 years, we should have a protocol for how we work with data quality that scales today. But let's go back to the comfy area. We have our few pretty circles, but can we still get something out of this? And I think you can. And I think a big part of it is just how we interact with structured data. So our pretty structured data, we're used to interacting with it through visualizations. And now we're throwing this new area into it, which is going to be chat a lot, right? Natural language. And as you can see, a lot of you guys and a lot of people in general have gotten used to chatting with ChatGPT and already are using that as maybe another tool instead of Google, for instance, for finding answers on the internet. I think that people are going to be doing the same thing for their business insights. And what's cool here is, of course, we already have the pretty data. We already have these islands that actually have really high quality data that's actually ready to be interacted with through chat. And so the combination of visualizations and chat, I think, is going to be really powerful when it comes to how we interact with our data in the age of generative AI. So what's Qlik doing in this space? Please, yes. So Qlik's been doing AI for a long time. I don't think this is news, but Qlik has actually been doing a lot of things here for a really long time. It's not like ChatGPT was released and then Qlik was like, God damn it, we need to make something now. They've been at it for a long time. And of course, Qlik has come at this with seeing, well, how can we actually combine the power of an associative engine with these new things we can do with AI and machine learning. So let me take you through this rainbow really quickly. So of course, we have Inside Advisor chat. Just a quick show of hands, how many have used Inside Advisor just in general? A fair amount. I would expect more at a Qlik developer summit. But hopefully I can give you some more inspiration then. But of course, Inside Advisor chat, we can make conversations with our data. Inside Advisor search allows us to search within our data. I'm going to go more into these and I'm going to demo some of it. And we have natural language generation. So we can actually already today just create, when we have a visualization, we can create a natural language object besides it that explains what's going on in the visualization. We have analysis types. So Qlik can guide users into selecting different measures and dimension, and will, of course, suggest visualizations that fit with those. We have advanced analytics, so both within Qlik, AutoML, and key driver analysis, which we spoke about earlier. We have the options for doing advanced analytics within Qlik. We also have, of course, specifically AutoML as an automation tool for doing machine learning and creating new models. And we can, of course, also integrate in with any tool you might like. So, I mean, some people I hear are doing data science in Python. Of course, that can also be integrated into the Qlik dashboards. And finally, we also have a connector for OpenAI. So you can do real-time integration with OpenAI. I'm actually going to show some of that later, because I think it's quite cool, some of the stuff you can do with that. But let me go a little bit more into, well, why is Qlik good at these things? What are some of these tools meant to be? And then I'm going to show how we can work with them. So let's start with a concept that Qlik has introduced. I'm not going to spend too much time on, but Qlik has this thing called business logic. I think it's really cool, but I don't have time to teach how we can work with business logic just now. But basically, business logic allows us to create business rules and customize how we are interacting with Insight Advisor. So we can get more predictable responses, right? We of course want novelty, but we also want predictability. We want to be sure that we're not getting weird answers back, or that when people are using a weird synonym that it doesn't compute. And we have a bunch of customizations we have here. We can create logical groups, we can classify data, we can specify what type of default behavior we want from Insight Advisor, we can define relationships in the data, we can choose which type of time periods it should give. We have a bunch of stuff that we can do to make it ready to be interacted with, so it's more predictable in the way that we're interacting with the Insight Advisor. And of course, finally, we can refine the vocabulary. So what this allows us to do is something like Insight Advisor Chat, where we can have normal conversations with our data. Now, just a quick note on this before I go too much into it. A note that a lot of people used Insight Advisor Chat when it first came out, like 3-4 years ago, something in that range. And it was not always giving the best responses. If you kept at it, you would have noticed that it's gotten better and better over the years. And something I'm going to get more into is this is a big area of focus for Qlik as well. So we're going to see a lot more improvements on this in terms of just how good it is at understanding what you're trying to get out of it, not just not computing if you don't use the exact right term that you use in the data model. But yeah, Insight Advisor Chats allows us to write with our data. So again, it's a fast and easy way to ask questions. What's cool about it is it's bi-directional. We can ask it questions, it can give us questions back. If like, is this what you're looking for? It can also generate visualizations, so it's not just text, which is a great thing as well. And as I said before, it's supported by business logic. So it's not just random stuff. We can actually control what type of responses it's going to give. And it's context aware. If you've been working with the different types of chatbots, that's a really big thing, that people want to ask questions and then follow-up questions and then follow-up questions to those follow-up questions. And so it's really important that it keeps being aware of the context that we're working in. And another important thing, it's linking to the apps. So if I sit in Teams, which is one of the ways I can interact with Insight Advisor Chat, and I'm writing a question, of course I don't just want to know what it might say what our sales numbers were last month. I also want to know which app did you get this from. Is it something I can trust? Can I go in and get the deeper analysis of this? It can already search across all of Qlik apps. It's multi-language support, and of course it's natural language, yada. So what's this for? Well, I would say it's mostly for business users. So it's meant for non-technical users that don't know what they're looking for most of the time, right? So if I'm not sure which app this type of insight is going to be in, then I can just ask Insight Advisor, and it's going to tell me which types of apps that I could get answers to this type of question in. And of course, it also solves the fact that a lot of users are never going to learn self-service, meaning that if there are insights they want out of the data that's not exposed through visualizations, and we don't want them exporting to Excel, then this becomes a really great way to avoid that Excel trap. So that's Insight Advisor Chat. We also have what's called Insight Advisor Search. I'm going to do this a little bit more quickly, because it's basically just building upon Insight Advisor Chat. So what Insight Advisor Search is, it can create visualizations for you within a Qlik app. So basically, instead of you having to go into edit mode and actually start using drag and drop to build a visualization, now you can just write whatever you want. And it's also going to tell you, well, when you wrote this statement, I chose this dimension, this measure, and I did it in this way. So you get all of the context around it as well. And we have analysis types. And that's basically inside advisor search, but just with some predefined paths. So it's a way for you to say, well, I think some of my end users think it's too daunting to write a question, maybe. Then we can instead say, well, what are you trying to do? Which type of analysis are you trying to achieve? And then it can guide you through the steps. Okay, if you're trying to do a historic analysis, then you should choose what measure you're looking for, what dimension, and then it's going to give you the visualizations that would fit with those. And this one is also for business analysts. And finally, something I'm going to show in just a few minutes. We also have generative AI integration. So a big thing here is, of course, the OpenAI integration. So we can chat with the ChatGPT models. So what this allows is actually a real-time integration with, I hate that word as well, real-time, but it's really, really fast integration with ChatGPT, right? And it can be self-hosted or it can be a public ChatGPT model, which allows you to bring some of the power of ChatGPT into your Qlik dashboards. And you can combine this with Qlik's application automation to also say, well, I don't just want to get, let's say I want to use it to write an email based on some data. I also want you to send that email. Just an example. Then you could use the automations as well to send out that email to complete the loop. And because I'm going to show it in a minute, and this is something I always get questions about, when we're doing the large language model integration, so right now we have OpenAI integration. Qlik is going to have integrations for all of the large models. We are sending basically, in the demo I'm showing now at least, we're going to be sending prompts with data and context to the model. Now the model in these cases I always recommend, would be something you host yourself, not just using a public model, because then you are serving data that can be trained on, right? So this is if you are hosting your own ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever model in your own secure environment. In that way, there's actually zero risk in terms of security with this, right? It's completely closed up from the rest of the world, and ChatGPT can't steal your data. But with that, I want to go into some demoing of these features. Now, I have stolen Morgan's PC, as you can see. And he has been foolish enough to give me his password as well. Oh my God, you tricked me. Let's see if I made a spelling error. Hey! Awesome. So let's start with a little bit of Inside Advisor, because if I start with the ChatGPT stuff, you're not going to pay attention. So for those of you who have enabled, I have Qlik Cloud for the first part, and then have enabled Inside Advisor. It will show up as a button on top here. And it's going to try and guide you into how to use it. So it should be foolproof, but you never know with end users. But let's just ask it a simple question. Show my apps. And it's showing me one of my apps. Cool. So in this case, I want to select this app just to make sure that it's, whenever I ask another question, if I had several apps, I wanted only to get answers within the context of my first app, right? So that's why it's a good way to start. And now let's just say something like, show my, I cannot do this American keyboard, Morgan. Let's say something like this, show my net sales from last year. Boom. And of course, the cool thing here is it creates a visualization. It's pretty fast, as you can see. And it's also telling me some insights about it. And it's fully interactive to begin with. And I get it shows my filters, which is important, I think. And a cool thing about this is that I can go directly from here into the application, right? So this would, as you can see, of course, this is cool if you just want some quick insights into your data. This is an easy way to interact with it. But it's also a good point for end users who have access to way too many apps, as a lot of end users do, and they're not sure in which app they can find this insight. So they can ask the question, and it's going to guide them into what applications might be good for answering this, so they can quickly go in and explore this further. So let's try and click that. So what it's going to do now is it's opening, of course, a new window. It's going to show me, and it's going to take me to Insight Advisor within that application. So I'm just an Insight Advisor right now. If I want to see the app, I'll just go here. Now you can see it's a completely empty app. It's literally just for Insight Advisor purposes. But here we are in Insight Advisor within the application. And for those of you who worked with it for a long time and not recently, you will see that analysis types is one of the new things we have here. So we have all of these cool types that we can choose from if we want like more guided experience, but we also have the option just up here to just ask a question. I'm going to take a question I asked yesterday, asking it to cluster products by cost and sales for 2023. So I'm not the quickest in creating Qlik visualizations, but even the quickest people I know at creating Qlik visualizations couldn't create a k-means cluster analysis this fast, right? So that's also part of the point. Of course, all of you who work with developing dashboards, you're really great at it, but this is just a way to speed up the process sometimes. And if it gives a bad answer and it just doesn't work the way you want it, you can edit the visualizations it gives you, and you can, of course, always just go back to normal edit mode. But let's say for these visualizations, I don't just want 2 clusters. For instance, I want 4 clusters. I can look if I agree with the normalization algorithm, all of that stuff. But let's just add it to a sheet. Let's create a new sheet. So really, really quick way to use it. Something else that's cool about this that you might have noticed is that it's also telling us some insights it found. And it's also giving me a bunch of other visualizations it think might be interesting for me. But if it sees me doing something like what I just did, which was adding it to my sheet, it will take that as input that, okay, if a user asks me this type of questions for this specific application, then this is actually a good visualization. So it also remembers. It's always training on your user input data, not sharing it with Qlik, but within your own environment. So let's go back out of this, and let's try and do something similar. Oh, that was not what I wanted to press. Oh, there he is. Let's say we want to do a trend with a forecast. Again, take something like very simple, order state, net sales. So this is the way you would use the analysis types, right? So I choose the type of analysis I want to do. It guides me into choosing, as we have here at the top, some measures, some dimensions that might be relevant. Now, for the specific type I chose now, it's going to suggest that I pick a date because I'm trying to do a forecast in time. And I can see that it made a pretty decent forecast, but I actually want more forecast steps. Let's say I wanted basically a whole year. And the cool thing here is not only does it create a quite good visualization, I think, but it's actually catching the trend. So there's a really obvious trend in this orders data that we have very seasonal sales. So we are in the spring and summer, we're selling a lot, almost spring. So, but it actually catches that, right? So Qlik also has these cool things built into their visualizations already, where you're using some of the power of Some cases AutoML, but in other cases just the associative engine together with some of the most popular forecast models. Cool. Now, do we have any questions regarding Insight Advisor? Do people have any experience with Insight Advisors they want to share? Before I move on to the next part after Insight Advisor. Because from my experience, I think this is actually a really cool, really underutilized tool in Qlik. And I think people have given up on it in some cases just because they tried it way too early, or they did it without preparing the business logic I talked about before. So you just go into an app, just say, well, let's try and use Insight Advisor straight away, without thinking about, well, should I maybe do some things to guide Insight Advisor into working in the way you would want it to work. Maybe you have weird dimension names and measure names. Of course, it's not going to get what those are and give good answers. So yeah, that's my 5 cents on that. So let's try and look at the OpenAI integration, because that's quite different. So here we have a night mode dashboard. I think we need to reload. And maybe a little bit too little context, I think, would be Jens' critique. But luckily, this is not what we're going to use it for right now. So I'm just making some quick selections. Oh, wait, no, I wanted the United States. So yeah, but you just have a dashboard like this, a little bit boring, Qlik dashboard. But what we want to try here is, well, what could be a user experience using something like ChatGPT? Well, a user experience we could create is have a button like this little light bulb up in the corner, if you can see it, that when I press it, it's actually going to put me into a new interface, right? So it's going to put me into my generative AI interface. And what we have here is an integration with ChatGPT 3.5, Morgan, right? ChatGPT 3.5 in a self-hosted environment. So this is our own model. We're not sharing any data here. And we can start asking it some questions. As you can see, in this application, we built in a default question, write a summary about the shipment details, yada, yada. And it gives us a really long, thought-out response, like you would probably be used to if you've been using ChatGPT for the past year. But I've also prepared some questions here. So I don't need to write too much. So now I'm asking it to give me a summary of our shipment performance, because what we're looking at here, sorry, I didn't say that before, context, it's fulfillment data. So how good are we at fulfillment when it comes to our customers? So now we ask the question, give us a summary of our shipment performance. And we can see the question it's giving to ChatGPT is, based on the data below, please answer this question, right? So we're sending it some data. That data, the data we can send it, is still have all the security rules you're used to. Still section access, filters, and all of that still works. So we're sending this query together with our question, and it gives us some really good answers back. So in this case, it tells us that we have a mix of early, on-time, and late performance and undefined. And it's telling us that customers like Carl Smith and Motorsports experience late deliveries varying from 2 to 169 days. Okay, so I have some customers here that have quite poor user experiences, right? That's something I might want to look into. So in this case, just copy this one. Let's ask another question as a follow-up. Give me a summary of Motorsports and their late deliveries, right? Because that's how we're used to working. We have a question, we get an answer, and that opens up new questions, how it usually is with business analytics. So in this case, it gave me a quick summary of Motorsports, telling us we have mixed record. They had deliveries between 2, 4, and 10 days, respectively. The quantity of these late deliveries is substantial, including orders containing X amount of items. Okay, so maybe we want to use this to write an email, right? To Motorsports. Apologizing for the late deliveries. So not only can we use it, of course, to interact with our data, get some quick insights, it can tell us trends, it can do it in a way that might be more easily digestible, combined with visualization, of course. But we can also use that and still have the power that a lot of people are using ChatGPT for today, which is doing stuff like creating real written emails. But now it can create not only a well-written email, but the email also contains the insights from the data, right? Because we gave it these insights. So now we have a completely personalized email. And if I had, let's say, a button where I integrate this with our Outlook, I could also just automate sending out that email straight from Qlik to the customer, maybe with some human in the middle, just making sure it looks fine. But it can also do stuff like we're used to with ChatGPT, right? It doesn't only speak English. We can also say, write in Danish. And even though we are using it in English and it's telling us that please, based on data below, answer this question, it's still able to translate that into to Danish language and can write something that's usable, right? So do we have anything we want to ask it? Do we have any suggestions for questions just to test that I haven't built like a golden path of questions that's going to give decent responses? It's fulfillment data. Any good questions for fulfillment data? No? It can be in Danish, English, Espanol. Is that? Sorry, can we? Yeah. So do you want to add the orders to the email? I'm just saving myself time by adding it to the existing query. And so you want to just tell them which orders? Yeah. Let's see, live demoing. Yeah, okay. So it gives us actually a quite good answer, I would say. So again, write an email and then just having 3 bullet points for the 3 orders that were delayed and telling us how much they were delayed. I would say a perfect answer from ChatGPT.
Could you ask it to compare our fulfillment data with the industry standard?
This model doesn't have access to, so if you're using ChatGPT online, it has access to Bing, so it can search on the web. So this has, it has a world knowledge that's built into ChatGPT, but it's not connected to the internet, the version we are using here. So I can't ask it data that's outside of, so it can't do that, it can't find industry standard. But of course, if you were hosting your own model, you could give that access to the web, and then you could ask that type of question. But not, sorry, not for this demo. Yeah, Mads? Sorry? My average shipping delays.
Can you repeat the question?
How bad's my average? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah. Do you want to add it to the email? Yeah, okay. Let me just go back. Let's see. something like this, if you can read it, or reverse. Now we are testing my prompt engineering skills. So now it's just giving me how much they were delayed on average, which is still fine, I would think, because it's actually telling us that it actually knows how to calculate averages for the data that we've given it, which should be correct. Yeah, 16 divided by 3. Yeah, that should be the correct average. Yeah, but I guess with some little more better prompt engineering from my part, it should give the right answer. But what you wanted to test, I was guessing, is that it can calculate the average based on input, something like that. Yeah. So what do you think? Do people think this is cool? Is this something you could see users using, not maybe tomorrow, but in the future? I see a lot of nodding, so people can't see everyone. Yeah, okay, cool, nice. Can we go back to the slides? Thank you. So that's some of what we can do right now. So nothing we've shown so far is something that you wouldn't be able to do if you have access to a Qlik Cloud Data Analytics instance. So a little bit about what's coming up next. Now I added AutoML as well, even though we haven't spoken that much about it. I just want to briefly talk about what's happening within AutoML because I think it's so cool. So AutoML is going to get a lot more features for data prep and feature engineering. So if you're working with AutoML today and you're doing feature engineering or some prep elsewhere, you're going to have those capabilities within AutoML really soon. They're also adding a data scientist as a service. So again, kind of like helping you build your AutoML models for you. You're also going to be able to have fully interactive analytics embedded into AutoML. So you can, within the AutoML framework, start doing some analytics. And you're going to get some machine learning ops and some governance improvement as well. When it comes to augmented analytics, what I just spoke about, what's coming up next is we're going to see a continued evolution of Insight Advisor. So as I talked about, Insight Advisor is already really cool, and it's only getting better and better. And some of the acquisitions that Qlik has made recently, especially Qlik, is going to add a lot to Insight Advisor, I think, because they have a lot of capabilities in building general AI, such as ChatGPT. So adding some of that power into Insight Advisor is going to be really great. They're also going to be working more on proactive, so proactively delivering insight through alerts and automations. So if you're working with alerts today, for instance, you need to set up all of the alerts. So building ways to make that more AI-driven. Of course, we have general automations. Then we have collaboration. So, of course, Qlik is really, really focused on collaboration. In this case, we're talking about collaborations with other tools. So as I spoke about, we have integration with ChatGPT. We might also want integration with, let's say, Llama, because it's a really great model as well. And all of the other types of tools and programs that's coming up. Part of this is also going to be integrating with vector databases, which is going to be a huge thing if your company is going to start building their own large language models. Of course, we have the point of pervasive, so deploying AI-driven capabilities in all of their tools. So that's meaning we don't just want it inside Advisor. We have it now. We also want it in all of the other tools in the pipeline. And finally, a really, really, really important thing, custom models. So Qlik is going to go into the space of helping you build your own custom models. So imagine ChatGPT that knows your business, right? And that is also going to make interactions such as the ones I just showed even better, because now we're not just giving it a small size of our data, it's actually pre-trained on our business data already, so it knows how our business works. It might know who the sales manager was that would be relevant for the customer with late deliveries, for instance, even if it wasn't in a data set. So yeah, really cool stuff. And especially on the last point, if really, really one slide about it, how it works. So if you're building your own fine-tuning large language models, really basically this is how it works. You have your data in whatever cloud storage or vector database you might want. You're adding your data together with a base model, so you don't create your own model to begin with. You're retraining something like ChatGPT 3.5, Llama, in the future probably something like Gemini as well. And that together with some hyperparameters, which is basically just saying how do we want to train it, gives us a fine-tuned model. So it's not like we can ever compete with ChatGPT on how many billions and billions of data points they have. We're just adding our own data into that big pile and making sure that it's weighed accurately. And then we can start interacting with it. So Qlik is also moving into this space. So yeah, Qlik has done AI for a really long time. They've done a lot of stuff that's really successful. They've done a lot of stuff that you can use today. And much more is going to be coming from Qlik in the future. Qlik is investing heavily in AI. So if it's important for your company to stay ahead of the curve on AI, keeping in touch with what Qlik is doing is really important. And I know that there are going to be some big announcement at Qonnect as well. So that will be early June. You should be hearing some noise. Cool. Questions? I need one question before I can let you have cake outside. Come on. No? Nothing? I was that clear? Yeah, Helene?
Yeah. Do you know how many uses Qlik language Danish instead of English in here?
How many uses Qlik in Danish?
Language, the master items.
Yeah.
Are they named in Danish or in English?
I don't know how many use it, but you can't use the insight advisor in Danish yet.
No, I know.
Yeah.
That's why we don't use it.
Yeah. It's in Swedish, though.
Okay.
Sorry, that's not helpful. No, but there might be an idea that it might be coming in Danish if they already have Swedish. Yeah. Swedes don't even believe that. Morgan?
Are these responses from ChatGPT, are they cached or saved in any respect? Can we reuse these questions, or what do we do with the responses when it comes back from ChatGPT?
So in the framework we just showed, it's not cached. So nothing is saved. So we are just giving it like a one time. So you don't also, in this case, you wouldn't have the history or context of previous questions. It wouldn't understand that as you do with ChatGPT, but that's also something that's going to be changing. It's more a policy matter, right? How you want to implement the system. But in this case, no. That's also makes it less scary, I think was your point, right? From a security perspective. Lina? You can yell.
It's because it's going to be recorded as well.
I'm not sure that you mentioned it, but what does it require to use the OpenAI with Qlik? Does it require any license or cost in that manner?
So the OpenAI connector is free. But as I said, you probably, if you're using it to send data, I mean, you can use it without sending data, of course, but then it's just ChatGPT and Qlik. Then I would recommend having your own model hosted in whatever cloud environment you're using. And then that would be the cost. I mean, there would be the compute cost of having that. It's quite inexpensive, actually. I've done it myself, set it up and built my own company for the stuff I've done. So it's not that bad. And it's also because the token limit there's some token limits and stuff like that you can play with that can help you control the cost side of it. Yeah? Other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to give the word back to Sophie.
So, thank you so much, Jonathan. This was the last presentation for today. Just really quick for me, and then you can get cake. If you want to follow us on LinkedIn or have any question that you don't get an answer for today, you got it here. And there's more. So your opinion means a lot to us. So please go to our survey through the QR code and give us feedback on the event. And before you think, then what's in it for me? You can actually win ChatGPT for 3 months and an Apple AirTag. And I'll get back to this slide afterwards, so if you don't have time to do it now, don't worry. And yeah, at last, I just really want to say thank you, all of you. I hope you had a great time. At least I did, so that's great. So if you have time, please go out and take some cake, coffee. We will be here as well for any questions and network. Again, thank you for attending, and thank you so much to all of our speakers. Can we just give them a little applause? And I hope to see you next year as well. Have a nice day.